"Here is my wife, Dalilah, and our daughter Nova," Sterling Harlow rasped, his voice defiant despite his fading breath in the opulent Harlow mansion. Eyes turned, sharp with disdain, to the black woman who dared step to his bedside, her hand clasping his, and the child clinging to her. The wealthy family's whispers buzzed. How could a man of their world wed her, bridging a chasm of social divide? Shock and scorn filled the room, each glance questioning her presence, her audacity. "I'm not asking for your approval," Sterling said, his words a final stand. "I'm telling you my truth. Hit like, subscribe, and stay with us, because this story begins 5 years ago, where a chance encounter sparked a love that would defy an empire. The air pulsed with a rhythm that clawed at Dalilah Winslow's nerves, a cacophony of electronic beats masquerading as music. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her champagne flute, the glass cool against her palm as a man's voice slithered through the crowd. "You don't belong here, do you?" His words, laced with venom, landed like a slap. Dalilah's lips twitched, not in pain but in defiance. The insult, meant to wound, bounced off her like rain on glass. She'd heard worse, felt worse, and tonight she refused to let it sink in. Instead, her eyes flicked to the ceiling, where chandeliers glittered like false stars, and she decided to escape, not from the man's words, but from the god-awful noise. She wove through the sea of sequined gowns and tailored suits, her heels clicking against marble, a faint smile curling her lips. The excuse was flimsy. She'd feign a wounded heart, a need for air. But the truth was simpler. The music was atrocious. Outside, the garden exhaled a quiet she craved, the air sharp with the scent of jasmine and damp earth. She leaned against a stone balustrade, her breath steadying, her laughter soft but unguarded. Freedom, even for a moment, tasted sweet. "You couldn't stand that music either, could you?" The voice was low, warm, cutting through the night like a blade through silk. Dalilah froze, her heart stuttering. She turned, and there he was, Sterling Harlow, his tie loosened, his dark eyes catching the moonlight. A stranger, yet his presence felt like a memory she hadn't lived. He stepped closer, hands in his pockets, a sheepish grin betraying his polished exterior. "I saw what happened in there. I'm sorry, but I'm guessing you left because that sound was an assault on the ears." Her laughter burst free, a bright, unguarded sound that startled her. "You think the music's bad too?" she asked, her voice teasing, her eyes narrowing with mock suspicion. He nodded, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared rebellion against the pretense of the night. They talked, first about the absurdity of the party, then about deeper things. Sterling spoke of his family's expectations, the weight of a name that felt like a chain. Dalilah confessed her own solitude, the way her ambition as an accountant in a cutthroat media firm left her isolated. Their words flowed like a river, unguarded, raw. She noticed the way his fingers fidgeted with his cufflinks when he spoke of his father, the way his jaw tightened. He saw the spark in her eyes when she talked of her dreams, the way her hands danced to punctuate her thoughts. Hours slipped away, the garden their sanctuary. Then, in a moment of reckless clarity, Sterling's voice dropped to a whisper. "What if we just got married?" His eyes held hers, half joking, half desperate, as if he'd found something he couldn't bear to lose. Dalilah's breath caught, her pulse hammering in her throat. She should have laughed it off, should have walked away. But her heart, that traitor, whispered back, "Why not?" "All right," she said, her voice steady despite the wild thrum in her chest. "Let's do it." The next morning they stood in a small chapel, the air thick with the scent of old wood and wax. A priest, bemused but kind, witnessed their vows. No guests, no fanfare, just two souls binding themselves in secret. Dalilah's hands trembled as she slid a simple band onto Sterling's finger, her eyes locked on his. His smile was a promise, fragile but fierce. They were strangers, yet they were everything. 5 years later, their life was a hidden tapestry of joy. Nova, their daughter, filled their days with laughter, her tiny hands smudging paint on Sterling's suits. He kept their moments in a secret album, tucked in his office drawer, Dalilah asleep with Nova curled against her, the three of them laughing on a beach. waves kissing their toes. Each photo was a rebellion against the world that would never understand. But Dalilah felt the weight of their secrecy, a shadow that grew heavier with each passing year. She caught Sterling's gaze sometimes, distant, as if he were fighting a war she couldn't see. "Will we ever tell them?" she asked one night, her voice soft, Nova asleep in her arms. Sterling's hand stilled on her shoulder, his silence louder than words. "Soon," he murmured, but his eyes betrayed the lie. Dalilah's heart clenched, a quiet ache blooming. She wanted to be seen, not hidden. She wanted their love to breathe in the open. That night, as she lay awake, the moonlight spilling across their bed, she traced the outline of Sterling's sleeping face. Her fingers lingered on his jaw, her mind racing. "What are you afraid of, Sterling?" she thought. "And why does it feel like we're running out of time?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, as the first threads of their carefully woven world began to unravel. Dalilah's fingers brushed the edge of the photo album, its leather cover worn from Sterling's secret touches. Inside, Nova's tiny hand clutched a seashell, her eyes wide with wonder. Dalilah's own face stared back, laughing, unaware of the camera. She snapped the album shut, her chest tight. These moments, their life, were locked away in Sterling's office, a treasure he guarded but never shared. She stood in their penthouse, the city's lights winking through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and felt the weight of their hidden world pressing down. "Sterling, when?" Her voice was soft but sharp, cutting through the hum of the evening. He stood by the kitchen counter, pouring wine, his movements deliberate, as if stalling. His shoulders stiffened, the glass pausing midair. "When what?" he asked, though his eyes betrayed he knew. "When do we stop hiding?" She stepped closer, her bare feet cold against the hardwood. "Nova's 3, Sterling. She deserves to know her family. I deserve—" Her voice cracked, and she hated it. She swallowed, forcing steel into her words. "I deserve to be your wife, not your secret." His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching. He set the glass down, too carefully, and turned to her. "You think I want this?" His voice was low, frayed. "My family. They'll tear us apart. You don't know them like I do." His fingers raked through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as his unraveling. "They've done it before, Dalilah. My cousin, his wife, she wasn't one of us. They ruined her." Dalilah's breath hitched. "So we live in the shadows forever? What kind of life is that for Nova?" Her hands balled into fists, nails biting her palms. She wanted to scream, to shake him, but the love in his eyes stopped her. It was raw, desperate, a plea she couldn't ignore. "Not forever," he whispered, stepping closer. His hands found hers, warm and steady. "Just until I'm in a position to protect us. The bank, the board. It's a chess game. One wrong move." He didn't finish, but his eyes, dark and haunted, said enough. She pulled back, her heart pounding. "And what if there's never a right move?" Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the ache of being unseen. She turned away, staring at the city below, its lights blurring through unshed tears. "I'm not invisible," she thought. "I won't be." Days bled into weeks, their life a delicate dance of love and secrecy. Nova's laughter filled their mornings, her tiny voice asking for "daddy stories." Sterling obliged, spinning tales of pirates and stars. But Dalilah saw the strain in his smile, the way his gaze lingered on their daughter, as if memorizing her. At night, when Nova slept, they lay in silence, the unspoken question heavy between them. Dalilah's fingers traced the ring on her finger, a vow that felt both sacred and suffocating. One evening, as rain streaked the windows, Sterling came home late, his suit damp, his face pale. "Board meeting ran long," he said, his voice hollow. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. Dalilah knelt beside him, her hand on his knee. "What's wrong?" she asked, though her gut already knew. "My father," he said, barely audible. "He's worse. The doctors don't know how long." His eyes met hers, raw with guilt. "If he finds out about us now, it'll destroy everything he's built. The company, the family, it's all tied together." Dalilah's throat tightened. "And us, are we just collateral damage?" Her words were sharp, but her hand stayed on his, grounding them both. He shook his head, pulling her close. his breath warm against her hair. "You and Nova are my real life," he murmured. "The rest is just noise." She wanted to believe him, but the word noise echoed in her mind, a reminder of the music that had once brought them together. "Is that all we are?" she thought, her heart twisting. "A melody no one else can hear?" Weeks later, Sterling's cough became a constant companion, a rasp that grew sharper with each passing day. Dalilah noticed the way he winced when he thought she wasn't looking, the way his hands trembled as he buttoned his shirt. "It's nothing," he said, but his eyes avoided hers. She didn't push, not then, but fear coiled in her chest, cold and relentless. One night as Nova slept, Dalilah found him in his study, staring at the album. His fingers traced a photo of them on their first anniversary, Dalilah's laughter frozen in time. "I've been a coward," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have told them. I should have shouted it from the rooftops." Her heart lurched. She knelt beside him, her hand covering his. "Then do it now," she urged, her voice fierce. "Tell them. Let us be free." He looked at her, eyes glistening, and nodded. "I will," he promised. "When I go back to the estate, I'll tell them everything." But as he pulled her into his arms, his heartbeat erratic against her cheek, Dalilah felt a chill. Time is slipping, she thought, her fingers tightening on his shirt. "And I don't know if we have enough." Dalilah's hands shook as she poured tea, the kettle's steam curling like a ghost in the dim kitchen. Sterling's cough had worsened, a jagged sound that tore through the penthouse's quiet. She glanced at him, slumped in an armchair, his face gaunt under the lamplight. His fingers, once steady, fumbled with a pen, leaving ink smudges on papers strewn across the table. "He's hiding it," she thought, her stomach twisting. "He's hiding how bad it is." "Sterling," she said, her voice soft but firm, setting the mug before him. "You need to see a doctor. Now." Her eyes locked on his, searching for the truth he wouldn't speak. He waved her off, his smile thin, unconvincing. "It's just a cold, Dalilah. I'll be fine." But his voice cracked, and the lie hung heavy between them. She crossed her arms, nails digging into her palms, fighting the urge to shake him. "You're not fine," her mind screamed, "and neither am I." Days later, the truth crashed down. The doctor's office was sterile, cold, the air thick with antiseptic. Sterling sat rigid, his hand gripping hers as the words fell. "Liver cancer, advanced." Dalilah's breath caught, her chest tightening as if the room had sucked out all its air. She felt Sterling's fingers tremble, his grip faltering. "How long?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Months, maybe," the doctor said, his eyes averted. "With treatment, we can—" "No!" Sterling cut in, sharp. "No false hope." Dalilah's heart pounded, her vision blurring. She wanted to scream, to beg, but her throat was a knot of unshed tears. Instead, she squeezed his hand, her nails leaving crescents in his skin. That night, Nova slept, her tiny chest rising and falling, unaware of the storm brewing. Dalilah sat by Sterling's side, the city's lights a cruel contrast to the darkness within her. "We'll fight this," she said, her voice fierce despite the tremor. "You, me, Nova, we're a family." Sterling's eyes, red-rimmed, met hers. "I want to go home," he said, his voice raw. "To the estate. I need to tell them about you and Nova. I need them to see you as my wife, the mother of my child." His words were a vow, but they carried a weight that made her heart lurch. "Come with me, Dalilah, please." Her throat burned. "They'll hate me," she whispered, her fingers twisting the hem of her sweater. "They'll hate us." "I don't care," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm done hiding you. You're my light." He reached for her, his hand trembling, and she let herself fall into his arms, her tears soaking his shirt. "He's slipping away," she thought, her heart fracturing, "and I can't stop it." The drive to the Harlow estate was a blur, Nova's chatter a faint hum against Dalilah's racing thoughts. Her hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the mansion loomed ahead. Marble columns, sprawling lawns, a fortress of wealth and judgment. She glanced at Nova in the rearview mirror, her daughter's eyes wide with curiosity. She doesn't know, Dalilah thought, her chest aching. She doesn't know what's waiting. Sterling waited in the east wing, his hospital bed a jarring intrusion in the opulent room. Dalilah's breath hitched as she saw him, pale, fragile, a shadow of the man who'd laughed with her in the garden. Nova clung to her hand, clutching a stuffed rabbit, her tiny brow furrowed. "Is Daddy okay?" she whispered, her voice small. Dalilah knelt, forcing a smile. "He's just tired, sweetheart. We'll make him smile, okay?" But her heart pounded, a drumbeat of dread. She led Nova inside, ignoring the stares of the staff, their whispers like knives. Sterling's eyes lit up when he saw them, a flicker of life in his hollow face. "My girls," he murmured, reaching for Nova. She climbed onto the bed, careful not to jostle him, and nestled against his side. Dalilah stood frozen, her hands trembling, as the door opened. Marcus, Sterling's brother, strode in, his face a mask of cold calculation. "What's this?" Marcus's voice was ice, his eyes raking over Dalilah and Nova. "Who are they, Sterling?" Sterling's hand found Dalilah's, his grip weak but defiant. "This is my wife, Dalilah," he said, his voice steady despite the effort, "and our daughter, Nova." The words landed like a thunderclap, the room shrinking under their weight. Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing to slits. "Your wife?" he spat, disbelief curling his lips. "You've lost your mind." Dalilah's pulse roared in her ears, her nails biting into her palms. She wanted to scream, to defend their love, but Sterling's hand squeezed hers, grounding her. "He's fighting for us," she thought, her heart swelling with pride and pain. But as Marcus stormed out, the door slamming behind him, she felt the walls closing in. The family's wrath was coming, and she wasn't sure they could withstand it. Sterling's eyes met hers, a silent plea. "Stay," he whispered. "Please." She nodded, her throat too tight for words, but her mind raced. "This is only the beginning," she thought, her fingers tightening around his. "And I'm not ready to lose you." Dalilah's heart thudded like a war drum as she stood in the Harlow mansion's east wing, the air thick with antiseptic and unspoken accusations. Sterling's hand, frail but warm, clung to hers, his breath shallow. Nova perched on the bed, her stuffed rabbit clutched tight, her wide eyes darting between her father and the strangers, filtering in. The room, with its gilded walls and heavy drapes, felt like a cage, each glance from Sterling's family a barbed wire tightening around Dalilah's chest. Marcus's voice still echoed in her mind. "You've lost your mind." But it was Elizabeth, Sterling's sister, who struck next. She swept in, her silk dress rustling, her face a mask of icy composure. "Sterling, what is this nonsense?" she demanded, her gaze slicing through Dalilah. "A wife? A child? You expect us to believe this?" Dalilah's nails bit into her palms, the pain grounding her. She wanted to scream, to shove the truth in their faces. But Sterling's voice, weak yet defiant, cut through. "It's not nonsense, Elizabeth. Dalilah is my wife. Nova is my daughter." His words trembled, but they carried a weight that silenced the room. Dalilah's throat burned, her eyes stinging as she watched him fight for them, his body betraying him with every labored breath. Elizabeth's lips parted, then snapped shut, her eyes narrowing. "You kept this from us," she hissed. "For years. Why?" "Because I knew you'd do this," Sterling said, his voice cracking. His hand tightened on Dalilah's, a lifeline. "You'd tear it apart, like you did with Robert's wife." The name landed like a stone, and Dalilah's breath caught. "Robert?" Her mind raced, piecing together fragments of Sterling's late-night confessions. A cousin, a scandal, a woman driven away. Elizabeth flinched, her composure cracking, but before she could retort, the door swung open. James, Sterling's lawyer, entered, his briefcase a shield. "Sterling asked me to bring these," he said, his voice calm but firm. He set a folder on the bed, its contents spilling out. A marriage certificate, Nova's birth record, bank statements, and then the album Sterling's secret treasure, photos of their life together. Dalilah was sleeping with Nova on her chest, Sterling laughing as Nova smeared cake on his face. Proof, undeniable and raw. Marcus snatched the folder, his fingers whitening as he scanned the documents. "This means nothing," he spat, but his voice wavered. "You were coerced, manipulated." His eyes locked on Dalilah, venomous. She's after the money. Dalilah's blood roared in her ears, her fist clenching. Say that again, she said, her voice low, dangerous. She stepped forward, her body trembling with rage she'd held back too long. I love him. I've always loved him. Can you say the same? The room froze, the air heavy with her challenge. Marcus's jaw twitched, but he said nothing, his silence a crack in his armor. Elizabeth's eyes darted away, her hands twisting her pearl necklace. Dalilah's heart pounded, her breath shallow, but she stood tall, refusing to shrink. I'm not invisible, she thought, her pulse a defiant rhythm. Not anymore. Sterling's hand tugged hers, pulling her back. Enough, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Not like this. His eyes clouded with pain, pleaded with her. She knelt beside him, her anger dissolving into fear as she saw the sweat beading on his brow, the way his chest heaved. He's slipping, she thought, her throat tightening. And they're stealing what little time we have. Nova's small voice broke the silence. Why's everyone mad? She asked, her rabbit pressed to her cheek. Dalilah's heart shattered, her arms wrapping around her daughter. They're just confused on sweetheart, she murmured, though her voice trembled. She shot a glance at Marcus, daring him to upset Nova further. He looked away, his jaw tight. James cleared his throat. There's more, he said, his tone cutting through the tension. He pulled another photo from the album, a candid shot of Sterling holding Nova, his face alight with love. Sterling wanted you to see this, to understand. Elizabeth's hand trembled as she took the photo, her eyes softening for a fleeting moment. But Marcus's voice sliced through. This changes nothing, he said, storming out, the door slamming behind him. The sound echoed, a warning of the battle to come. Dalilah's gaze returned to Sterling, his eyes fluttering shut, his breathing ragged. She brushed his forehead, her fingers trembling. I'm here, she whispered, her voice breaking. We're here. But her mind raced, a storm of fear and fury. They'll fight us, she thought, her heart pounding. But I'll fight harder. As Nova nestled against her, Dalilah felt the weight of Sterling's promise, the vow she'd made to him. The family's rejection was a wound, but it was one she'd bear, for him, for Nova, for the life they'd built in the shadows. Dalilah's fingers curled around the edge of Sterling's hospital bed, the metal cold against her skin, grounding her as the room pulsed with hostility. The air was thick, the Harlow family's whispers like static, each word a needle pricking her resolve. Sterling's chest rose and fell unevenly, his face pale under the harsh light, and Nova clung to her mother's side, her rabbit dangling by one ear. Dalilah's heart thrummed, a wild beat of fear and defiance. They can't break us, she thought, her jaw tight, but the weight of their stares made her feel like a stranger in her own life. James, the lawyer, stood firm, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Sterling anticipated this, he said, his eyes sweeping the room. He pulled another document from his briefcase, its edges crisp, official. This is a notarized statement, signed by Sterling 6 months ago. He knew you'd question his choices. He handed it to Elizabeth, who hesitated, her fingers trembling as she took it. Marcus scoffed, his arms crossed, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. More theatrics, he muttered. What's next? A love letter. Dalilah's blood surged, her nails biting into her palms. She wanted to lunge at him, to make him feel the ache of her love for Sterling, but Nova's small hand tugged at hers, anchoring her. Not now, she thought, her throat burning. For her. She knelt, brushing a curl from Nova's forehead, forcing a smile. It's okay, sweetheart, she whispered, though her voice wavered. James ignored Marcus, his tone steady. There's something else you need to see. He opened the album again, revealing a photo Dalilah hadn't seen before. Sterling cradling a newborn Nova, his eyes glistening with tears, Dalilah asleep beside them. The room stilled, the image a silent scream of truth. Elizabeth's breath hitched, her fingers brushing the photo as if it might burn her. Who took this? She asked, her voice barely audible. I did, Sterling rasped, his eyes fluttering open. Every word seemed to cost him, his chest heaving. I wanted to remember every second. Dalilah's heart twisted, her hand flying to his, their fingers intertwining. His skin was clammy, too cold, and she fought the panic clawing at her chest. Not yet, she thought, her pulse roaring. Please, not yet. But the room erupted, voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief. This is absurd, a cousin snapped, her voice shrill. He's been brainwashed. Others nodded, their faces a gallery of scorn. Dalilah's vision blurred, her breath shallow. But then a new voice cut through. Emma, Sterling's niece, barely 20, her eyes wide with shock. Wait, Emma said, stepping forward, her voice trembling but firm. There's something you don't know. The room turned to her, and Dalilah's stomach lurched. Emma's hands twisted together, her gaze darting to Sterling. Robert, he had a son, a black son. They made him hide it. They threatened to cut him off. Her words hung like smoke, heavy and suffocating. Elizabeth's face drained of color, her necklace slipping through her fingers. Marcus's jaw dropped, his composure shattering. That's enough, Emma, he barked, but his voice lacked conviction. Dalilah's mind reeled, pieces clicking into place. Sterling stories of his cousin's exile, the family's cruelty. They've done this before, she thought, her heart pounding with rage and sorrow. She stepped forward, her voice low but steady. No one should be erased for who they are. She looked at Emma, then at the cousin who'd spoken. Not Robert's son, not Nova, not me. Her words were a blade, cutting through the room's tension. She bent down, lifting a small boy who'd wandered in, unnoticed, his dark eyes wide. He's family, she said, her voice breaking. Just like us. The room fell silent, the weight of her words settling like dust. Emma's eyes glistened, and even Elizabeth looked away, her hands trembling. But Marcus's face hardened, his voice cold. This isn't over, he said, turning to leave. The door's thud echoed, a promise of battles to come. Dalilah turned back to Sterling, her heart fracturing as she saw his eyes close, his breathing shallow. She brushed his cheek, her fingers trembling. We're still here, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. Nova climbed onto the bed, her small hand patting Sterling's. Daddy, wake up, she said, her voice a plea. Dalilah's chest tightened, her breath catching. He's fighting, she thought, her heart a tangle of love and fear. But how much longer can he hold on? James gathered his papers, his face grim. I'll prepare for what's next, he said quietly, his eyes meeting Dalilah's. They'll fight the will. Be ready. She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. As the family dispersed, their whispers trailing like shadows, Dalilah sat beside Sterling. Nova curled against her. The room was quiet now, but the storm was far from over. They'll try to erase us, she thought, her fingers tightening around Sterling's. But I'll make sure they see us. Dalilah's fingers trembled as she adjusted the blanket over Sterling's frail form. The hospital bed's sterile hum, a cruel contrast to Nova's soft humming. The little girl sat cross-legged at her father's side, her stuffed rabbit nestled in her lap, her tiny voice weaving a lullaby. Dalilah's chest ached, each note a dagger twisting deeper. Sterling's eyes fluttered, his breaths shallow, each one a fragile thread tethering him to them. He's fading, she thought, her throat raw, her hands clenching to keep from shaking. And I can't stop it. The room was a battlefield, the silence heavy with the family's earlier venom. Marcus's parting words, "This isn't over," echoed in her mind, a storm brewing beyond the walls. But here, in this moment, it was just them. Dalilah brushed a damp strand from Sterling's forehead, her touch lingering, memorizing the warmth of his skin. His eyes opened, clouded but fierce, locking onto hers. Dalilah, he rasped, his voice a ghost of itself. Promise me. Her heart lurched, her breath catching. Anything, she whispered, leaning closer, her lips trembling. She felt Nova's gaze, wide and uncomprehending, and fought to keep her voice steady. Don't let them erase you, he said, each word a struggle, his hand groping for hers. You and Nova. You're my truth. Don't let them take that. His fingers, cold and weak, squeezed hers with desperate strength. Dalilah's vision blurred, tears spilling despite her will. I'm losing you, she thought, her heart fracturing. And I'm not ready. I promise, she choked out, her voice breaking. She pressed her forehead to his, her tears falling onto his cheek. "We'll fight. For you. For us." Nova's small hand patted Sterling's arm, her voice faltering. "Daddy, don't go," she said, her eyes glistening. Dalilah's chest tightened, her arms wrapping around her daughter, shielding her from the truth neither could escape. Sterling's lips curved into a faint smile. "My princess," he murmured, his hand brushing Nova's cheek. "You're my star." His eyes flickered to Dalilah, a silent plea. "Tell them everything." His voice faded, his chest stilling. The heart monitor's beep slowed, then flatlined, a sound that shattered the world. Dalilah's sob broke free, raw and ragged, as she clutched his hand, willing it to move. Nova buried her face in her mother's side, her cries muffled but piercing. The room blurred, nurses rushing in, their voices distant. Dalilah held Nova tighter, her body trembling, her mind screaming. "He's gone." The words echoed, hollow and cruel. She kissed Sterling's forehead, his skin already cooling, and whispered, "I'll keep our promise." Her heart was a wound, bleeding with every breath, but she stood, Nova in her arms, her resolve a burning ember in the dark. The funeral was a cold affair, the cathedral's stained glass casting fractured light on the Harlow family's stoic faces. Dalilah stood at the back, Nova's hand in hers, their presence a silent defiance. Marcus's glare burned from across the aisle, Elizabeth's eyes averted, her hands twisting her scarf. Emma, the niece, offered a small nod, her face soft with sympathy. Dalilah's jaw tightened, her nails biting into her palm. "They can't look at us," she thought, her heart pounding. "But they will." James approached, his face grim, a folder under his arm. "The will readings tomorrow," he said quietly. "It's going to be a fight." Dalilah nodded, her throat too tight for words. She glanced at Nova, who clutched her rabbit, her eyes searching the crowd for her father. "She doesn't understand," Dalilah thought, her chest aching. "How do I make her understand?" That night, in their penthouse, Dalilah sat on the floor, Nova asleep in her lap. The city's lights glittered outside, indifferent to her grief. She opened the album James had given her, Sterling's secret keepsake. Each photo was a stab. Nova's first steps, Dalilah's laughter, Sterling's eyes alight with love. Her fingers traced his face, her tears falling onto the page. "You fought for us," she thought. "Now it's my turn." The will reading loomed, a battlefield waiting. James had warned her. Sterling had left everything, his personal fortune, his shares in the Harlow Bank, to her and Nova. The family's rage would be relentless. Dalilah's heart pounded, her breath shallow as she imagined Marcus's cold fury, Elizabeth's calculated disdain. "They'll try to break us," she thought, her fingers tightening around the album. "But I won't let them." Nova stirred, her voice sleepy. "Is Daddy an angel now?" Dalilah's throat burned, her arms tightening around her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's watching us." But as she kissed Nova's forehead, her mind raced, a storm of fear and resolve. The family's war was coming, and she was ready to fight. For Sterling's truth, for Nova's future, for the love they dared to build in the shadows. Dalilah's pulse thundered in her ears as she sat in the Harlow family's mahogany-paneled boardroom, the air heavy with the scent of polished wood and old money. Nova clung to her side, her small fingers twisting the hem of Dalilah's dress, her rabbit tucked under her arm. The family's eyes bored into them, Marcus's glare sharp as a blade, Elizabeth's face a mask of restrained fury, others whispering like vipers. Dalilah's hands trembled, but she kept her chin high, her spine rigid. "They won't break us," she thought, her heart a furnace of grief and defiance. Not today. James stood at the head of the table, his briefcase open, papers neatly stacked. "Sterling's will is clear," he said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "His personal assets, properties, investments, and his controlling shares in Harlow Enterprises go to Dalilah Winslow and Nova Harlow." The words landed like a grenade, the room erupting in gasps and protests. Marcus slammed his fist on the table, his face red. "This is insanity," he roared. He wasn't in his right mind. Dalilah's nails bit into her palms, the pain grounding her. She wanted to scream, to hurl Sterling's love in their faces, but Nova's soft whimper stopped her. She pulled her daughter closer, her lips brushing Nova's hair. "It's okay," she whispered, though her voice shook. "It's not okay," her mind hissed. "They're tearing him apart." James raised a hand, his calm unshaken. Sterling anticipated this. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket, his eyes meeting Dalilah's for a fleeting moment. Her heart lurched, hope and dread tangling in her chest. He plugged it into a laptop, and Sterling's face appeared on a screen, his eyes tired but resolute. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. "I'm Sterling Harlow," he said, his voice steady despite the pallor of his cheeks. "I'm of sound mind, and this is my truth. Dalilah is my wife. Nova is my daughter, my blood. I love them more than anything." His words were a blade cutting through the room's hostility. Dalilah's throat burned, tears spilling as she clutched Nova's hand. Sterling's gaze seemed to find her through the screen, his voice softening. "Don't let them erase you. You're my legacy." Marcus's chair scraped back, his face twisted. "This proves nothing," he spat, but his voice wavered, his eyes darting away. Elizabeth's hands twisted her scarf, her lips trembling. Emma, the niece, stared at the screen, tears streaming down her cheeks. Dalilah's chest tightened, her breath shallow. "He's fighting for us, even now," she thought, her heart swelling with love and pain. The video shifted to a montage, Sterling laughing with Nova, Dalilah's smile as they danced in their kitchen, a family hidden but whole. The images were a silent scream, undeniable proof of their bond. The room's hostility cracked, murmurs fading into stunned silence. Dalilah's tears fell freely now, her fingers tracing the air where Sterling's face glowed. "You did this for us," she thought, her heart breaking anew. James closed the laptop, his voice firm. "The will is legally binding. Any challenge will be met with this evidence." He handed Dalilah a folder, his eyes steady. "Sterling made sure you're protected." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak, her fingers clutching the folder like a lifeline. As the family dispersed, their whispers trailing like smoke, Elizabeth lingered. She approached Dalilah, her hands shaking as she pulled a small album from her purse. "I found this in his office," she said, her voice barely audible. "He kept you close." Dalilah opened it, her breath catching. Photos of her and Nova, moments as Sterling had cherished in secret. Her tears fell onto the pages, her heart a tangle of grief and gratitude. Emma knelt beside Nova, her voice soft. "You look just like him," she said, her smile trembling. Nova's eyes lit up, her small hand reaching for Emma's. Dalilah's chest ached, a flicker of hope piercing her sorrow. "They're starting to see us," she thought, but Marcus's absence loomed, a shadow of the fight to come. That night, Dalilah sat on the penthouse floor, Nova asleep in her lap. She opened the album Elizabeth had given her, each photo a wound and a balm. Sterling's smile, Nova's laughter, their life together. It was real, undeniable. Her fingers trembled, her tears falling. "You gave me this," she thought, her heart pounding, "and I'll fight for it." The media storm erupted the next day, headlines blazing. Harlow heir's secret family revealed. Public support surged, the image of Dalilah and Nova resonating with strangers. But Marcus's silence was a warning, his threat of a lawsuit hanging like a storm cloud. Dalilah's resolve hardened, her jaw tight. "They'll come for us," she thought, her fingers curling around Nova's sleeping form. "But we're ready." Dalilah's heart hammered as she stood on the terrace of the Harlow estate, the evening air cool against her skin, carrying the faint scent of roses. Nova's small hand nestled in hers, her daughter's eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun bled gold into the sky. The family's voices drifted from the lawn below, tentative laughter, clinking glasses, a fragile truce after months of war. Dalilah's fingers tightened around Nova's, her pulse a steady drumbeat of resolve and grief. "We're here," she thought, her jaw tight. "And they can't unsee us now." The will's reading had ignited a firestorm. Marcus had stormed out, vowing to contest it, his threats echoing in her mind. But Sterling's video, his voice raw and unyielding, had shifted the tide. The public's outcry, fueled by grainy photos of Dalilah and Nova, a family hidden in love, had cornered the Harlows. Dalilah's chest ached, her breath shallow as she recalled the headlines. The strangers' messages of support flooding her inbox. They see us, she thought, but the victory felt hollow without Sterling's hand in hers. Emma approached, her steps hesitant, her eyes red-rimmed. Dalilah, she said, her voice soft. I'm sorry. For everything. Her hands twisted together, a nervous tick Dalilah recognized from Sterling. I didn't know how much he loved you. I should have seen it sooner. Dalilah's throat burned, her lips trembling. He loved you too, she said, her voice steady despite the ache. He just couldn't show it the way you wanted. Emma's tears fell, and she nodded, stepping back to join the others. Dalilah's heart clenched, a flicker of hope warring with her sorrow. One ally, she thought. It's a start. Elizabeth emerged from the crowd, her face softer than Dalilah had ever seen. I spoke to Marcus, she said, her voice low. He's still angry, but he watched the video again. It's changing him. She paused, her hands clutching a small velvet box. This was Sterling's. He'd want you to have it. Dalilah opened it, her breath catching. A locket, engraved with Nova's initials, a photo of the three of them inside. Her tears spilled, her fingers trembling as she clasped it around her neck. You're still with us, she thought, her heart fracturing. The gathering below grew quieter, the family's eyes turning to Dalilah and Nova. She felt their stares, a mix of curiosity and grudging acceptance. Her resolve hardened, her spine straightening. Come on, sweetheart, she said, lifting Nova into her arms. Let's show them who we are. She descended the steps, Nova's weight grounding her, her heart pounding with every stare. Marcus stood apart, his face a storm, but his wife, Catherine, approached. We're setting up a foundation, she said, her voice tentative, in Sterling's name, for children, like Nova. Her eyes flicked to the ground, shame coloring her cheeks. We'd like your help. You knew him best. Dalilah's breath hitched, her nails biting into her palms. They're trying, she thought, her heart a tangle of pain and possibility. I'd like that, she said, her voice steady. For him. Catherine nodded, a small smile breaking through, and Dalilah felt the ground shift beneath her. A bridge, she thought. Not trust, not yet, but a start. Later, Dalilah stood alone, Nova playing with Emma nearby, painting stars on a canvas. Dalilah's fingers traced the locket, her tears falling silently. She'd made her own move, using part of Sterling's fortune to fund education for Robert's hidden son, a boy the Harlows had buried in shame. The decision had sparked whispers, but Dalilah didn't care. No one should be erased, she thought, her jaw tight. The Sterling Harlow Foundation, her second act, was already taking shape. A beacon for children of color, a promise kept to the man she'd loved. Nova's laughter broke her reverie, her daughter's voice bright. Mommy, look! She pointed to the sky, where the first star gleamed against the fading gold. It's Daddy, winking at us. Dalilah's heart lurched, her tears spilling as she knelt beside Nova. You're right, sweetheart, she whispered, her voice breaking. He's always watching. She pulled Nova close, her arms a shield against the world. The family's voices faded, their tentative steps toward reconciliation a distant hum. Dalilah's heart pounded, her resolve a burning flame. We're not invisible anymore, she thought, her fingers brushing Nova's curls. The Harlows were changing slowly, but the real victory was hers and Nova's. Their love, their truth, etched into the world Sterling had left behind. As the stars multiplied, Dalilah stood, Nova's hand in hers, the locket warm against her chest. The fight wasn't over. Marcus's silence promised more battles, but she was ready. For you, Sterling, she thought, her eyes fixed on the sky. For us. The horizon glowed, a testament to their unbreakable bond, a legacy that would outshine the shadows. Dalilah and Nova's journey, born from a secret vow and forged through loss, unveils a truth that outshines prejudice. Love is an unyielding force. Sterling's legacy lives in their courage, a beacon of redemption against a family's shame. Dear readers, your hearts have walked this path with us, Share your reflections, your tears, your triumphs. Thank you for embracing this tale of pain and hope. We invite you to join us for the next story, where new voices await. Stay with us, for every story is a star in the sky of human connection.